Okay, we are going to start now with topic 11. This is the rest, basically, of the kinds of questions for the reading comprehension section. And 3 weeks ago, we talked about the first 3 kinds of questions that you would see in the reading comprehension section of the SAT. What do you remember of those 3 kinds? Sachin, you won't remember any of it. The detail questions, that's one. Very good. And what was the one important thing to remember when looking at detail questions? That's close. Don't guess. Don't infer. That's exactly right. Don't infer anything on a detail question. Do you remember any of the other 3 types of questions we talked about 3 weeks ago? Global. Awesome. That is another kind, most definitely. This is the kind everybody did the best on the second time after we talked about it. So those are fantastic. And what are those mostly referring to, global questions?
As a whole.
Yeah, the passage as a whole. That's awesome. And what's the last kind that we talked about last week? This is the hard one. They're vocab. Vocab in context. And these ones were referring to like particular vocabulary words, the meaning of particular vocabulary words in a sentence, and they're the ones that you want to move through the fastest. Remember, we talked about 30 seconds or less if you can on the vocab and context questions to give you time for the long passages and things like that. These today we are going to talk about are the last 2 kinds of questions. There are only 5 in all of the questions you'll see, and the last 2 are function questions and inference questions. And before we begin, I do want to say that these are probably the 2 most difficult types of questions to get right on the SAT. If you understand how they work and what they're looking for in these questions, you can get the right answer really pretty easily. So we're going to talk in depth about exactly how these work. I will say for this class, even the people who we talked about, some people love the reading section, or not love, but some people do well in the reading section, some people do better on the math section. Even for those of us in class that did really well on the reading section, these function and inference questions are the place where you can pick up the most points. I think across the board, our highest number in this class was 80% of the function questions right and 85% on the inference questions. There were, I think, 12 function questions on the last test and 16 inference questions, which means even for the folks that did the best on this section, you could get up to, I think I figured out, 13 more questions right, which would give you 100 more points and 10% bump on your test as a whole on test day. So these are questions you really want to figure out the workings of, exactly what it is you're looking for. So let's skip over to page 346, and we'll take a look first at function questions. Now, let's start by figuring out what exactly that means. Can anybody give me a rough working definition of the word function? What does that mean? Not necessarily in this context, but just the word as a whole. What is something's function?
How it works.
How it works. How it works. That's a great answer, Deandra. Thank you. So the function of something is how it works, and a function question is looking at how something works inside the passage, how something that the author has put in the passage works inside the passage. So remember we talked about 3 weeks ago, we talked about normally when you're reading something and you're reading it for comprehension, you're looking at who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? Those are the things you need to know about that paragraph. But remember in the SAT, what did we need to know? Why and who. Yeah, why and who said that. It was why, and who said that, right? So that's really what we're looking for here. Why did the author put something particular that they're going to mention to you in the question in this passage? That's really what you're looking for. What point was the author trying to make? So when it says focus on in our box here, you want to focus on why the author used something, why the author put that in, what was the author's purpose in doing so. If you are a person who enjoys writing, for me, I enjoy writing, and I found it very helpful when taking the SAT to try and picture myself, if I was writing this passage, why would I add this in? Why would I put that sentence in? If you hate writing, that's not a good strategy, but it can be helpful. All right, so the next box, it says, remember that. There are phrases. I said these are very hard questions to answer unless you know the cues. And so you want to remember these cues. One is the author, something like the author does something and so forth in order to. In order to. That is a phrase that suggests you're looking at a function question. The next one is the phrase something, 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 something serves to. That's another good one that suggests a function question. So it's talking about how it works. What does it serve to do? What is it used in order to do? And another good one, this isn't an entire list, but is meant to. These are the kinds of things you're going to see. The author used, the author placed quotation marks there because they were meant to, that sort of thing you'll see as phrasing in these kinds of questions. And the last box there, ask about the purpose of. You will see all kinds of things that they're asking about. They might ask about a particular word, a phrase, punctuation. They like to ask about punctuation. They might ask about a sentence, why it's there. They might ask about a paragraph in a longer passage, why it's there. They might ask about a particular detail. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to see referenced. Ask me questions generally about function questions and how you'll see them on the SAT.
How will you see them on the SAT?
That's a general question. You will see these kind of function questions really across the board. You'll see them in paired passages. You'll see them in long passages, short passages. So this kind of phraseology you are going to see really in every section of the reading comprehension on the SAT. So it's definitely worth understanding. Okay, so let's look at a good example of what you would come across on the SAT on test day. We're going to take a look at this this example at the bottom of page 346. It is a short passage, so what are we going to do first? Question stems first, that's exactly right, very good. So short passages, read the question stems first. Before we go to that, what else are we going to do? We're going to read the question stem first and?
Cover the answers.
Yay, cover the answers. That's exactly right. You're going to predict before peeking, so cover the answers so that you're not tempted to look. Okay. If you'd like to read the question for me, question 1.
I'll read it.
Thanks.
The second sentence of the paragraph, lines 4 through 6, functions primarily as...
Great. All right, so there's our question. Now remember, we're going to look for, now that we've read our question first, we're going to look for clues in the question stem itself. So what sort of clues do you see in the question stem? Awesome. 4 through 6. That's definitely one of our clues. What other clue do you see that tells us what kind of question we're dealing with?
Functions primarily
Yes.
as...
Yeah, that's a pretty simple one. I like to start you off easy. So the word functions tells you that it's a function question. Awesome. All right. So now let's look back at our paragraph. And remember, we're going to read actively. We're not going to passage map a short passage. We will only do that with long passages, but we are going to read actively and take notes. And like you said, we're going to look at our topic, our scope, and our purpose. So I'm going to read the first sentence out loud, and I want you to think on that topic, scope, and purpose, because I'm going to be asking. It is hypothesized that sleep serves some crucial function to the nervous system, but amazingly enough, scientists have not yet discovered what that function is. What can you tell me so far about the topic and the scope and the purpose of our paragraph?
It's about sleep.
It's about sleep. Awesome. And what about the scope? Remember, the scope is more exactly what the author is interested in.
The purpose of sleep?
Yeah. And do we know what the purpose of sleep is?
No.
No. All right, so that's a good question that he's pursuing. Purpose of sleep. All right, so we have the topic and scope already in the first sentence. Now, we want to look very specifically at our second sentence that's listed, right? Because we want to know the function of that sentence. What's the point that the author is trying to make with that sentence? Sleep eludes effective study in part because it is so difficult to observe sleep from the inside, that is, while one is actually doing it. What sort of point is he making in this second sentence in our paragraph?
An explanation
An explanation of what?
for the problem that they're having.
Yeah, an explanation, exactly. An explanation for the problem that they've just listed. That's a great prediction for our answer for number 1. So let's take a look then at our answers and see if something matches.
Look at that.
Would you look at that? Which one is it?
B.
B. Yeah, and this is a great example of why it really does work to cover those answers, make a good prediction, and very oftentimes you will see your prediction right there. All right, so let's move on to question 2. The use of quotation marks around inside, line 6, and outside, line 8, serves primarily to emphasize. Now, what clues are in this?
Line 6 and line 8.
Okay, line 6 and 8. The quotation marks. What else? What other clues tell us what to do with this question?
Serves primarily.
Yep. Serves to. And that is one of our cues for a function question. So we know that we're going to be trying to figure out why the author chose to put those quotes on. Why did he do that? Okay? Let's look at our sentence. Sleep eludes effective study in part because it is so difficult to observe sleep from the inside, that is, while one is actually doing it. Psychologists have found, however, that they can study sleep from the outside by measuring the electrical activity of a brain while its owner is asleep. Why would the author put quotes around inside and outside? What would be the point of that?
He wants to make it easier for people to understand.
Yeah. So he's using easy words in place of harder words. That's a great answer. Shall we see if our prediction is somewhere in our answer choices? Does anyone see a good match?
E.
E. The author does not fully endorse the use of these terms. That one is so tempting. I agree with you, and I'll tell you why it's so tempting, because as speakers at this point, one of the things that we often do is use quotes around something when it's not entirely true. Oh, I really love the taste of that. Oh, I really like those new shoes, right? Putting quotes around it means the opposite of whatever you're saying, that we use that pattern in our speech. But is the author trying to suggest that he doesn't believe in those terms, inside and outside?
B.
B is another really tempting answer choice. I agree. This is a really good one to point out. This is one of the wrong answers that you'll see on nearly every function question. And I'll show you how it's wrong, which will really help you avoid them. The SAT loves putting wrong answer choices that explain not why the author used it, but what it means, what that example means. And this B, the difficulty of sleep, studying sleep in a rigorously scientific manner, definitely that's what the example is talking about. That is an explanation of what the example means. But really what we're trying to get at is the why of it. Why did the author use the quotes, not what the example means? And so this is, you will see this kind of answer on every function question. So if we're looking at why the author would use the quotes, and we said that he used the quotes to use a simple word in place of a harder word.
A.
Yeah, very good. A is correct. It's a tricky one because the phraseology is weird. The metaphorical nature of the terms as used in this context. But really what they're talking about is using one word meaning another word. Like it's, yeah, like a metaphor. So that's awesome. Ask me questions about function questions. Anyone? Don't all jump at once. You know, it makes me nervous.
So is this like the average function question?
Are those average function questions? They are. They are.
The other types of
Other types?
Yeah.
Yes, they have. They're certainly going to write a lot of different types in. They're all going to have that same trend to them. Yes, they're going to have those sorts of phraseologies we just talked about. Serves to, is meant to, like how does it work? And then they're going to be asking you, why did the author put that in? And a lot of the answers are going to explain the example rather than talk about why the author used the example. So those are all things, those are habits you'll see the SAT writers using over and over again.
Stick to why.
Stick to why. Yep, that's exactly right. The questions you want to answer are why is more important than what? The questions you want to answer are why, and who said that?
That's
So,
pretty much a function question. A
Huh?
why question.
It's why did the author use it? So you really want to think of what the author's purpose was for using the quotes, for using that phrase, for using that word, for using that detail. What was the purpose? All right, let's move on to page 348, and we're going to talk about the last kind of question you will see on the SAT reading comprehension section. Inference questions. And these, again, are one of the two trickiest kinds of questions. They're one of the ones you see most frequently. You can see, in fact, the most frequently, 135 smart points on these. There were 16 of these questions on the SAT that you took. So this is an important one. I'm going to start by asking, what is an inference? Okay, it's a statement.
I guess.
Yeah, it is kind of like a guess. It is an intelligent guess. It's a guess where you take the facts that you know to help you come to a conclusion that's not stated directly. So we're going to suggest writing that down. Inference equals facts to draw unstated conclusion. I'm going to give you a good example of this that will hopefully help you keep what an inference is in your head. I find it a fairly comical example. I have a younger brother. He is 1 year younger than me. When he was in college, he was a computer type fellow, and he worked in the computer lab every day. And while he was in the computer lab, this young lady, very pretty, would come every day to the computer lab. There are 5, 6 people working there. Every day she'd come to the computer lab. Every day she'd have a problem with the computer. Every day she would go up and ask him the question. Eventually she baked him some cookies and put them in his campus mailbox with a note thanking him for his help in the computer lab and thanking him for being so kind and sweet, etc., etc., etc. Now, from those facts, what sort of conclusion would you draw?
She loves him.
Yeah, she really liked him, right? Now, here's the problem. My brother does not infer, unfortunately. He is a very smart fellow. He now writes crossword puzzles for the New York Times for a living. He's a smart guy, but he cannot make an inference. This is very unfortunate. Making good inferences is important in your life for many reasons. But this is what you're doing. You're using facts to draw an unstated conclusion. The cookies in the mailbox, those are facts. The conclusion he did not come to was an inference. Does that make sense? All right. So, inference questions, they ask you to draw an unstated conclusion from facts. They use phrasing like, the author implies. These are the words you want to remember. This is not an entire list. There will be others. The author implies. The author infers. The author believes. The author suggests. The next line, and you answer them by making a conclusion based on fact. An inference is not an opinion. They're not asking for your opinion. When you start thinking about how you feel about the passage and you answer the questions using your opinion, you're going to answer them incorrectly. You need to look for the facts to back up what you're thinking. Our last line here, tempting wrong answer choices include extreme language. Very often you'll see answers like the author loves blah, 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 or the author thinks something so is fantastic or amazing. All of those are going to be really extreme. Unless the language in the passage is really extreme, don't be fooled by those really strong words. The other one that you'll see very often is they will use facts that are not stated in the piece. They will use those facts in the answer choices. So if it's not stated, if your facts aren't in your passage, don't make any assumptions about them in the answer. Questions about how inference questions work.
What did you say the first box was?
The first box is where did I put it? Here, right here.
Oh.
Ask you to use facts to draw an unstated conclusion. Any other questions about the concept of inference questions? All right, then let's look at a question like you would see on test day. Remember, we are doing a short passage again, so we're going to read the question stem first. Number 3. William, would you like to read number 3?
Sure. All right. It can be inferred from the paragraph that the author considers a naked mole rat.
Awesome. So what are our clues?
Infer.
Infers. Yeah, that's a sneaky one, right? That's kind of giving up everything right there, but definitely. And what are we trying to figure out?
What the author considers naked mole.
Yeah, what the author thinks, right? Okay. So now we're going to look back and we want to think about our topic, our scope, and our purpose. Let's see. Grayson, can you read the first sentence? Of the passage? Yeah.
The naked mole rat, while not as visually impressive as the lions, giraffes, and zebras that also inhabit East African savanna, have recently captured the attention of naturalists around the world.
Okay, so what's our topic?
Naked mole rat.
Yep, the naked mole rat. We're just going to call him NMR, naked mole rat. The scope, what does the author find particularly interesting about the naked mole rat? What is he writing about?
That it captured people's interest.
Yes, what people?
Naturalist.
Naturalists. All right, so our naturalists like them. And we remember we talked about 3 weeks ago with Tacoma Narrows Bridge. We want opinions. Those are one of the things that we're interested in. So we know that the naturalists like it. What is a naturalist?
Someone who likes nature.
Someone who likes nature, definitely. It actually
Studies it.
studies it. Thank you. Very good. So it's someone who studies nature. That's exactly right. All right, so we know that naturalists like it. Read the rest of the paragraph silently, and at the end of it, please look up at me. And I'm going to be asking you what you think the purpose of all the mess at the end of this paragraph is. Awesome. So why do you think the author is writing all of that business at the end about the naked mole rat? What's his purpose?
Set them apart from other mammals.
What?
To set them apart from other mammals.
Okay, to set it apart from other mammals, there's definitely a lot of information about it.
Explain the reasons why naturalists believe that it's an exceptional creature.
Yeah. Explain. That's great. Explain why it's different. Like you said, all of these different reasons, the reasons why it's different from other mammals and interesting to naturalists. That's exactly right. So there's our great topic, scope, and purpose. So when we're looking at how the author feels about the naked mole rat, let's make a prediction given this is what he's mostly talking about.
He likes them.
Pretty much. He likes them. He thinks, or really what he's spending all his time is explaining is why naturalists like them, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's see if we can find an answer that fits with that.
D.
D. D is exactly right. They have an unexpected scientific appeal. That is perfect. And that is why it really helps to predict before you peek. That's fantastic. Okay, we're going to take a last look on 349. We're going to do one more. Again, a short passage, so we're going to read the question stem first. Deandra, would you read the question?
Based on the passage, the author would most likely describe the mother's attitude toward American culture as.
All right. So, what are the clues that we're looking for that are in this question?
What the author thinks.
Mm-hmm.
The mother's attitude.
Right. So we're looking for mom's attitude. And what words suggest that this is an inference question?
The author would most likely.
Mm-hmm. The author would most likely describe. So you can see it's not always those words, but it's something like that. How would the author describe that? So they're really thinking sort of from the author's point of view. Okay? All right, so what I want you to do on this one, I want you to look through the passage. I want you to underline clues in the passage about what she feels. And when you look up, I'm going to ask you for what clues you found, and we will try and predict from those clues. All right, what clues did we find as to her attitude?
She never planned to stay.
Ooh, that's a good one. She didn't plan to stay. Did she?
Yes.
They saw their American residence as temporary.
Right. But was it?
No.
No. Any other clues?
She enjoys a breakfast of cup chai or whatever.
Yes, and?
And she
What goes with her chai?
frozen bagel instead of the traditional fried chicken.
Yeah. This is another really good clue that I like a lot. She has a bagel, which is American, and her chai, which is Indian. So what do you think, based on those clues, her mom's attitude would be?
Mixed.
Yeah, mixed, 50-50. So you want to look and see what your best answer would be then?
Mixed.
Mixed. Yep, right there on the page.
But couldn't you just like read the last sentence? Like, since they forged an alliance.
I'm sorry, say again?
Like, couldn't you just see the last sentence of that passage and just figure out the answer from that?
Potentially, but keep in mind there are going to be several, and there are going to be several questions for each passage, and there will be clues in the passage in different places for each of those sentences. So it is best to read the passage and just underline the important bits like you guys were doing right now. You did a great job. We're going to go on now to guided group work. Everybody's going to start on the same page on 352, so we don't need to shift around. We can just, each table will be its own group. The one thing I'm going to say is if when you're doing the guided group work you find these function and inference questions really hard, one really sort of quick way of practicing deciding which kind of question is which is in the purple book of practice SATs that you have. Go through those. You don't necessarily, although it's a great idea to actually answer the questions on one of those tests in the reading comprehension side, but if you don't have a lot of time, go through and just mark, is it a detail question? Is it an inference question? Is it a global question? And then go to the end and see if you got those right. Because really knowing what kind of question it is helps a ton. Get more points on test day. Does anybody have any questions before we go on to page 352? All right, let's begin.